The first warm light of dawn touched the rocky dragon nesting grounds, spreading soft gold over every stone and scale. High on the cliffs, several dragon eggs rested in smooth, round nests made of soft leaves and sparkling minerals. Among them was a small egg that glowed a gentle shade of blue. It was much tinier than the others, and many dragons often looked at it with quiet doubt. From inside the little egg, a tiny dragon named Emberlin felt the world for the very first time. His shell had always felt cool, unlike the warm, powerful eggs around him. Still, he listened every day as the older dragons spoke proudly of their future hatchlings, strong, bold, and fierce. Emberlin could not understand all their words, but he sensed their excitement. He also sensed something else. They never mentioned his egg. One bright morning, the sky filled with soft wind, and the nest grounds trembled with a new sound: crack, crack, crack. All the eggs began to hatch. From the largest shells came young dragons with wide wings and shiny scales. They chirped with confidence as their parents watched proudly. And then, the tiny blue egg shook gently. A small crack formed. A little nose pushed through, followed by two bright golden eyes that reflected hope and curiosity. Emberlin slowly crawled out of the shell. His wings were smaller than the others, his tail short, and his scales soft, but his eyes held a warm spark of wonder. For a few moments, the dragons around him simply stared. They had expected large and strong hatchlings, and although the others matched that dream, Emberlin did not. The elders whispered in low tones. Some looked away, unsure how to react. Emberlin felt none of this directly, but he sensed a strange emptiness in the air, something cold, like a gentle wind that carried no welcome. The other young dragons quickly joined their parents, learning their first steps and playful wing stretches. Emberlin followed, hoping to blend in. But his small wings made him trip. His soft roar sounded more like a tiny squeak. A few dragon parents watched with concern, but they did not step forward. As hours passed, Emberlin tried again and again. He climbed small rocks, attempted to spread his wings wide, and even practiced breathing warm air, like he saw the others do. But nothing quite worked the same way. He was different, and though he didn't understand why, he felt it deeply. That evening, the dragon clan prepared for their seasonal journey to the high mountain roost. Every dragon gathered at the edge of the nesting grounds. The elders called the young ones to follow their parents. Wings spread across the sky like a wave of shimmering colors. Emberlin hurried to join them. He wanted to go with them. He wanted to feel part of the group, no matter how small he was. But as he reached the center of the field, many dragons were already lifting off. The wind from their wings pushed him back, making him stumble. He looked around for someone to guide him, but no dragon came forward. They simply rose into the air. One by one, Emberlin tried to flap his wings. He tried very hard, but his wings were not strong enough yet. He could only lift himself a few inches before falling gently back onto the soft grass. He called out with a hopeful chirp, but his tiny voice was lost beneath the sound of hundreds of wings. Soon the sky filled with bright scales as the dragons flew toward the mountains. Their shadows stretched long across the ground until they slowly disappeared into the distance. The nesting grounds grew quiet. Emberlin sat alone in the vast open space. He looked up at the sky, his small heart full of questions he could not express. Why had no one stayed behind? Why had no one guided him? Did they expect him to follow on his own? He did not know. He only knew he was alone. But Emberlin was not the kind of hatchling to give up easily. With a soft hum, he picked himself up and began walking in the direction the dragons had gone. Maybe he couldn't fly, but he could still walk. His tiny feet made gentle sounds on the stone, and occasionally he would pause to rest his wings. Hours passed. The sky slowly turned from blue to orange to deep purple. The young dragon grew tired and hungry. His steps became slow, and his small body shivered from the cool evening breeze. Then, for the very first time in his life, Emberlin felt something truly new. A sense of fear. Not a sharp or painful fear, but a quiet fear of being lost, of having no one to guide him. He curled beside a warm rock and looked up at the stars. Their soft glow comforted him a little, but he still wished for someone to be there beside him. Far away, the lights of a human research outpost blinked gently in the forest below the cliffs. It was a simple gathering of metal buildings, small and clean, with bright panels that collected sunlight. Inside one of them, Dr. Leora Hayes, an experienced xenobiologist, studied the readings on her screen. She had spent years researching rare creatures, especially those believed to exist only in stories. Her newest project focused on understanding unusual heat signatures in the region. But tonight, her screen showed something unlike anything she had seen before. An extremely small, yet highly concentrated heat point, moving slowly across the forest border near the cliffs. "That's strange," she murmured, leaning in. Curiosity pushed her outside. She stepped onto the soft forest ground, her boots crunching gently over leaves. She carried a small scanner that flashed softly in the dark. The signal grew stronger as she walked. Meanwhile, Emberlyn had climbed down from the cliffs in hopes of finding shelter. The descent was slow, but he used his small claws to grip the stones. When he finally reached the forest floor, he felt calmer. There were soft plants, cool streams, and gentle sounds. But he still felt alone. As he wandered deeper, a sudden light appeared between the trees. Emberlyn froze. His golden eyes widened in surprise. The light moved slowly, sweeping across the ground. Dr. Hayes stepped into a small clearing and gasped softly. There, sitting in a patch of moonlight, was a baby dragon. His scales glimmered like tiny blue crystals. He looked delicate, almost fragile. Nothing about him seemed threatening. Emberlyn watched the human carefully. She was unlike any creature he had ever seen, tall, gentle-looking, with warm eyes full of curiosity rather than fear. Her steps were slow and careful, as if she didn't want to frighten him. "It's okay," she whispered, keeping her distance. "I won't harm you." Her voice was soft, calm, and full of kindness. Emberlyn tilted his head, sensing that her energy felt safe. He didn't understand her words, but he felt no danger. Dr. Hayes slowly lowered herself to the ground, sitting quietly so she wouldn't seem too large or overwhelming. Emberlyn blinked, unsure of what to do. Then, he took a small step forward. The human smiled gently. "There you go," she said quietly. "You're not alone." Something warm fluttered in Emberlyn's small heart. It wasn't fear or confusion, it was comfort. A feeling he had not felt since the moment he hatched. The forest was calm around them, and the moonlight made Emberlyn's scales sparkle. Dr. Hayes took out a small food pouch and gently placed a soft piece of fruit on the ground. She pushed it closer with a stick to avoid surprising him. Emberlyn sniffed the fruit, then slowly took a bite. His eyes brightened with delight. "You must be hungry," she said softly. For the first time in his short life, someone cared. The little dragon stepped closer, his eyes warm and trusting. Dr. Hayes felt her heart swell with emotion. She didn't know where this tiny creature had come from, or why he was alone. But she knew one thing with complete certainty: she would not leave him behind. Under the quiet, star-filled sky, a lost hatchling and a gentle human began their very first moment of connection. One built not on fear or expectation, but on kindness and hope. Morning arrived gently, touching the forest with soft, golden light. The trees glowed with fresh morning dew, and small creatures rustled through the leaves. In this calm and peaceful setting, Emberlyn woke slowly, stretching his tiny wings. He had fallen asleep near a warm lantern placed by Dr. Leora Hayes, the human who had found him the night before. The gentle heat of the lantern made him feel comfortable and safe. Leora sat a few steps away, carefully writing notes into a small notebook. Every few minutes, she looked up from her work to check on the little dragon. When Emberlyn finally lifted his head and blinked at her, she smiled warmly. "Good morning, little one," she said in a soft voice. "I'm glad you stayed close." Emberlyn tilted his head at the sound of her voice. He didn't understand her words completely, but he recognized the kind tone. He let out a small chirp and gently wagged his tail. This made Leora chuckle softly. She took out a small container from her bag and placed a piece of fruit on the ground again. Emberlin sniffed the air instantly. He remembered the sweet taste from last night. Slowly, he walked forward and took a bite. Leora watched with amazement. "You really like fruit, don't you?" she whispered. After eating, Emberlin looked at her with curious eyes. Leora gently extended her hand and then placed it on the ground, palm up, showing she meant no harm. Emberlin watched for a few seconds. Thinking, finally, he stepped forward and lightly touched her hand with his tiny claw. Leora felt her heart swell with warmth. It was a simple gesture, but for a creature so small and unsure, it meant trust. A new routine begins. Over the next few days, a quiet routine began between Emberlin and Leora. She would wake early, check her instruments, gather samples from the forest, and of course make sure the little dragon ate enough. Emberlin followed her everywhere. His tiny steps sounded like soft tapping against the forest floor. Whenever she examined new plants or rocks, Emberlin would climb onto a nearby stump and watch, his head bobbing with curiosity. He especially loved watching her use small tools that beeped or flashed lights. He sometimes tried to mimic the sounds, much to Leora's delight. "You're quite the helper," she told him one afternoon while scanning a glowing blue flower. Emberlin puffed his chest proudly at the compliment, even though he had no idea what she said. Sometimes Leora wondered where he had come from. Dragons were rare in this region, and hatchlings were almost never seen alone. She suspected he might have been separated from his family or left behind accidentally, but she didn't want to frighten him by searching too openly. For now, she focused on keeping him comfortable. At night, Emberlin curled beside her small tent, warmed by a soft blanket she had folded for him. Leora stayed awake longer, looking at the stars, wondering if a human and a baby dragon could truly become friends. But every time Emberlin made a soft snoring noise beside her, she felt hope that they could, learning to communicate. As days passed, Emberlin grew more confident. He began to mimic some of Leora's movements, tilting his head when she did, blinking slowly when she smiled, and even tapping the ground twice when she set down food. Leora quickly realized he was trying to communicate. One morning, Leora sat cross-legged on the grass and tapped the ground lightly. Emberlin watched her, then tapped the ground with his tiny claws. Leora laughed with pure joy. "We're making progress," she said. Emberlin chirped in response, pleased with himself. Their bond grew stronger each day. Emberlin no longer felt the emptiness he once felt on the cliff. With Leora beside him, he felt safe, comforted, and most importantly, valued. Although he missed having a place among other dragons, he no longer wondered if he belonged anywhere. He felt he belonged with her, exploring the forest together. Leora often traveled through the forest to collect research samples, and Emberlin always came along. The forest felt large and mysterious to him, but with Leora walking confidently ahead, he found the courage to explore more. He discovered he could climb trees surprisingly well, using his tiny claws to grip the bark. He also learned that he could warm small areas of the ground by focusing on the gentle heat inside him. It wasn't powerful like adult dragons, but it was enough to make Leora's campfire easier to start. "Thank you, Emberlin," she said one evening when he warmed a few stones for her cooking pot. "You're very talented." Emberlin chirped happily and sat tall, pleased with the praise. Every discovery made Leora more certain that Emberlin was unique. His abilities were gentle rather than strong, subtle rather than bold, but they were beautiful. She believed he had a special purpose, not one built on strength, but on harmony. A growing concern. But as peaceful as their days were, Leora slowly began to sense something troubling. During her research trips, she noticed footprints on the forest paths, human footprints that did not belong to her team. She also found broken branches and signs that others had been searching through the area. Back at camp, she checked her communication device. News had spread that an unusual creature had been sighted near the cliffs. Explorers and collectors were becoming curious. Some groups traveled to distant lands to find rare animals, hoping to capture them for study or worse, display. Leora's heart tightened at the thought. She looked over at Emberlin, who was happily rolling a small round berry back and forth with his nose. He had no idea the world outside their little forest held danger. He had no idea some people might not treat him with kindness. Leora knelt beside him with a serious expression. "Emberlyn," she whispered, "I need to keep you safe." Emberlyn looked up and blinked, sensing her sudden seriousness. He placed his tiny paw on her knee. A gesture he had learned meant reassurance. Leora smiled softly. "Thank you," she whispered, "but let's be careful from now on. A sanctuary begins." Determined to protect him, Leora decided to build a hidden sanctuary deep within the forest. It would be a place where Emberlyn could stay safely, away from curious eyes. She chose a quiet spot surrounded by trees so tall that light filtered through them like sparkling threads. She began gathering materials, fallen branches, smooth stones, and large leaves. Using her scientific tools, she shaped them into a small shelter with a wide opening for Emberlyn to enter easily. Emberlyn watched with interest, helping in his own way. He warmed stones for her tools, carried tiny sticks in his mouth, and even brightened the area with his soft, glow-like heat. Whenever the light grew dim, when the sanctuary was complete, Leora stepped back proudly. "What do you think?" she asked. Emberlyn walked inside slowly. The space was cozy, warm, and perfectly his size. He curled up in the corner and let out a happy hum. Leora smiled. "Good. Now you have a safe place." The little dragon chirped and walked back out to nuzzle her gently. It was his way of thanking her. Training and growing, Emberlyn's confidence grew more each day. Leora encouraged him to practice his abilities. She knew that if he ever needed to protect himself or hide, he should be prepared. They practiced gentle wing exercises, small jumps, and controlling his warming aura. Emberlyn worked hard, even though his abilities were soft and delicate. Leora always encouraged him with kind words. "You're improving so much," she told him during one training session. "You don't need to be the strongest, just yourself," Emberlyn chirped proudly, his wings fluttering with excitement. As he trained, Leora realized something important. Emberlyn had a natural gift for calming the forest. When he released a soft, warm glow, animals nearby became peaceful, birds sang sweeter, and the breeze felt softer. It was not a fierce ability, it was a gentle one. But it was powerful in its own way. Leora wrote many notes about this ability, amazed by how rare and beautiful it was. A close call. One afternoon, while Emberlyn and Leora were exploring near a stream, they heard distant voices. Emberlyn froze, and Leora immediately placed a protective hand near him. "Hide," she whispered softly. Emberlyn quietly slipped behind a cluster of tall bushes. Leora crouched nearby, pretending to study a plant. She kept her senses sharp. Two explorers walked past the edge of the stream, talking excitedly about the mysterious creature rumored to be in the area. Their tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't gentle either. They were simply curious, unaware their curiosity could bring harm. After they left, Emberlyn slowly emerged. His small body trembled slightly. Leora knelt down. "It's okay," she whispered, brushing her hand gently along his back. "We'll be more careful." Emberlyn pressed himself against her leg for comfort. That moment solidified something in both of them. Their bond was no longer just friendship. It was trust, peace, at day's end. That night, Leora sat beside a small, controlled fire, while Emberlyn rested beside her. Fireflies danced around them like tiny stars. Emberlyn watched them with wide, glowing eyes. "You are not alone anymore," Leora said softly. Emberlyn curled up, placing his tiny head on her foot. His breathing slowed peacefully, and his body glowed faintly from the warmth inside him. Leora looked at him with affection. She didn't know what challenges might come next, but she knew she would face them with him. Together, they were stronger, and for the first time in his life, Emberlyn fell asleep not as a rejected hatchling, but as a cherished companion. The forest had slowly become a place of peace for Emberlyn and Dr. Leora Hayes. Each morning, soft sunlight filtered through the tall leaves, making the forest floor glow with warm patterns. Birds greeted the day with light songs, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees like a whisper. Emberlyn had begun to recognize these sounds as part of his new life. safe, calm, and full of learning. Every day, he grew a little stronger. His tiny wings stretched farther, his steps became lighter, and his warming aura grew more controlled. Leora watched his progress with pride. She wrote detailed notes in her journal each evening, recording everything she learned about his gentle abilities. "You're growing so fast," she told him one morning as he practiced flapping his wings. Emberlin chirped proudly and made a small hop into the air, though he still couldn't quite stay up for long. But while their bond strengthened, the forest around them began to change. There were new sounds, distant footsteps, hushed voices, and the occasional flash of light that didn't belong to the natural world. Leora noticed it first. Emberlin sensed it too. Even if he didn't understand it, something unfamiliar was entering their peaceful space. Unwanted visitors. One afternoon, as Leora and Emberlin returned from exploring a quiet stream, Leora suddenly stopped. She touched the ground gently and examined the soil. "Footprints," she whispered. Emberlin tilted his head. To him, they looked like simple dents in the earth. But Leora understood the patterns immediately. "These are new," she muttered. "They belong to people who aren't from our research team." Emberlin's wings lowered slightly. He didn't feel scared, but he sensed Leora's concern and stayed close to her leg. Over the next few days, the signs grew clearer. Small flags were placed on trees, marking paths. Bits of equipment appeared near the forest trails. Leora found a metallic sensor, half hidden under leaves. It didn't belong to her outpost. Someone had set it up to scan the area. Leora tightened her jaw. "They're searching for something," she said. "And I think I know what." Her eyes drifted to Emberlin, who was playfully tapping a leaf with his tiny tail. He had no idea how special he truly was, or how others might react if they found him. Leora knew she had to protect him, no matter what. Strength, through practice. To keep Emberlin safe, Leora encouraged him to train more seriously. Not for fighting, but for confidence. She believed that if Emberlin understood his natural skills, he would know how to stay calm in difficult situations. They practiced simple things at first. Wing balance, soft gliding from low branches, creating gentle warmth on command, using his glow to brighten dark areas. Emberlin enjoyed these lessons. His favorite exercise was creating bright light bursts. He'd focus carefully, his tiny body warming softly, and then pop a soft glow would float around them like a warm firefly. Leora clapped every time. "You're amazing," she always said, and Emberlin always stood a little taller afterward. One evening, Leora held a small mirror in front of him. Emberlin looked at his reflection, his blue scales glowing softly, his curious golden eyes blinking back at him. He had never seen himself so clearly before. He touched the mirror gently with his paw. "This is who you are," Leora whispered. "You may be small, but you shine in your own way." Emberlin chirped happily and pressed closer to her leg. The forest grows uneasy, but things outside their sanctuary were becoming less peaceful. Birds flew in different patterns. Small animals moved quietly, as if sensing something unfamiliar. Even the wind seemed to carry new scents. One morning, Emberlin climbed a tree to practice gliding. From above, he saw something unusual: groups of people walking with equipment, scanning the ground and pointing to the sky. Their movements were careful, focused, and full of curiosity. Emberlin didn't understand, but he felt a slight discomfort. He let out a soft chirp, calling for Leora. Leora rushed to him and followed his gaze. Her heart sank. "They're getting closer," she whispered. She gently lifted Emberlin into her arms and brought him back to the sanctuary she had built for him. The little shelter, tucked between tall roots and hidden under large leaves, looked cozy and safe. But even so, she knew it might not be enough. "If they find you," she whispered, "I don't know what they'll try to do." Emberlin didn't understand her words completely, but he sensed her worry. He pressed his head against her shoulder, trying to comfort her. Leora took a deep breath. "We need a plan, a clever defense." Over the next few days, Leora worked on improving the sanctuary. She used natural camouflaging materials, like moss and leaves, so the shelter blended into the forest. She also placed tiny harmless sensors around the area, so she would know if any humans approached. Emberlin watched carefully, wanting to help. Sometimes he warmed stones to help her reshape them. Other times he brightened dark areas so she could see her work better. "You're a wonderful partner," Leora told him. Emberlin chirped, proud of his role. Leora then created a series of coded signals using small lights. She taught Emberlin what each one meant. A blue light meant it was safe to come out. A green light meant to stay quiet. A yellow light meant she needed help with something small. A red light meant he should hide immediately. Emberlin learned quickly. He practiced hiding quietly inside the shelter until she gave the signal. His ability to glow softly made it easier. He could dim his warm light until he blended perfectly with the shadows. "You're learning so fast," Leora said proudly. Emberlin puffed his chest happily. First close call. One quiet afternoon, Emberlin was playing with a few bright berries, arranging them in little circles. Leora was checking her equipment near the sanctuary. Suddenly, a soft beep came from one of her sensors. Leora's heart jumped. The sensor only beeped when something entered their area. She rushed to Emberlin and pointed to a red light she activated on her device. "Hide," she whispered urgently. Emberlin recognized the signal instantly. He hurried inside the shelter and curled into the smallest shape he could. His glow dimmed until it was almost invisible. Leora hid behind a thick tree, her breathing quiet and controlled. A moment later, two explorers walked into the clearing. They carried scanning devices, their expressions curious. They looked around slowly, examining the ground, the leaves, and the trees. One of them pointed at a large rock. "I'm sure the signal came from here," he said. The other nodded. Something warm was definitely moving around this area. Leora held her breath, hoping Emberlin stayed calm. The explorers walked around for several minutes, but found nothing unusual. Eventually, they shrugged and turned away. "Maybe it was just an animal," one of them said. "Let's check the next area." When their footsteps faded, Leora rushed back to the shelter, tapping the blue light. Emberlin peeked out slowly. His little body trembled. Not from fear, but from the stress of trying so hard to stay silent. Leora knelt and gently stroked the top of his head. Emberlin pressed himself against her leg and let out a relieved chirp, a growing resolve. That night, they sat near a small fire. Emberlin rested with his head on Leora's foot, while she looked up at the stars thoughtfully. "Emberlin," she whispered, "I think we need something more than just hiding." Emberlin lifted his head, blinking at her softly. "You are special," she continued. "Your glow, your warmth, your gentle nature. People will be drawn to you, not because they want to harm you, but because they're curious." Emberlin's tail curled gently around her ankle. "So we must be prepared," she said. "Not to fight, but to be smart, to stay ahead, to protect our peace." Emberlin chirped softly, understanding her tone even if he didn't know all the words, and in that moment, something changed inside him. He felt a spark, the soft beginnings of courage. Not the loud bravery of a strong dragon, but the quiet courage of someone who wanted to protect the person who had protected him. Hope among the trees. The next morning, Emberlin woke early and stretched his wings. He practiced gliding, warming stones, and creating calming glows with renewed determination. Leora watched him with admiration. "You're growing into your own strength," she said. Emberlin chirped proudly. He wasn't trying to be like other dragons anymore. He was becoming himself, a little dragon with gentle power and a big heart. And though danger moved closer through the forest each day, Emberlin and Leora stood ready, together. The forest woke quietly, filled with soft morning light that slipped through the leaves like gentle threads of gold. Birds fluttered above the tree canopy, and the wind carried the scent of sweet earth. Emberlin stretched slowly, his wings shimmering as they caught the sunlight. He had grown noticeably over the past weeks, still small for a dragon, but stronger, brighter, and more confident than ever before. Nearby, Dr. Leora Hayes packed her equipment. She checked her scanners, wrote notes in her journal, and reviewed her maps. But today, her movements felt slower, more thoughtful. Something in the air felt different, like a calm before a change neither of them could fully predict. When Emberlin walked over to her with a soft chirp, she smiled gently. "Good morning, Emberlyn," she said. "You're up early." He nudged her bag with his nose, wanting to know what she was doing. Leora let out a soft sigh. "I think things are about to change for both of us," she whispered. Emberlyn blinked, sensing the weight in her voice. He pressed closer to her leg, offering comfort in his usual gentle way. Signs in the sky. Later that morning, as Emberlyn practiced gliding from a low branch, Leora suddenly froze. She tilted her head and squinted up at the sky. Something shimmered far in the distance, moving shapes with wide wings and bright scales reflecting sunlight. Emberlyn landed beside her and followed her gaze. His eyes widened. The shapes in the sky grew clearer. Dragons. A full group of them. Emberlyn's heart fluttered. It was the same clan he had been born into, the same group that had flown away, leaving him behind without guidance. He felt a swirl of emotions, confusion, curiosity, and a deep, quiet hope he didn't fully understand. Leora glanced at him with gentle concern. "Do you know them?" she asked softly. Emberlyn lowered his wings and made a small sound, half unsure, half longing. "They must be migrating again," Leora said. "But to come so close to this forest, that means they're looking for something, or someone," she thought. Though she didn't say it aloud. The dragons circled above the forest, their shadows sweeping across the ground. Emberlyn's glowing scales caught their attention. They let out distant calls, curious, surprised, maybe even confused. Emberlyn stepped behind Leora in instinct before peeking out again. He didn't feel fear, only memories he could not fully explain. Leora knelt beside him. "It's all right," she whispered. "You're not alone this time." He pressed his head against her hand, comforted. A meeting between two worlds. By noon, the dragons began to descend. They landed gently in a wide clearing not far from Leora's camp. Their size and presence filled the area with a quiet majesty. None of them seemed hostile, they were simply watching, curious and cautious. Emberlyn stepped forward slowly, his wings trembling a little. Leora stood behind him, ready to support him if he needed it. One elder dragon stepped closer. His scales shone with deep, rich colors, and his eyes carried ancient wisdom. He studied Emberlyn with long, careful blinks. The elder made a soft hum, a sound full of surprise and recognition. Emberlyn chirped back nervously, unsure of the right way to speak. His voice was small compared to theirs, but it carried a gentle hope. Leora watched with her heart pounding. She had no idea how dragons communicated exactly, but she sensed that this moment was important, perhaps more important than anything that had happened since she met Emberlyn. The group of dragons murmured gently among themselves. None approached too quickly or too boldly. Instead, they looked at Emberlyn with growing curiosity, as if realizing that this little dragon, who seemed so different, had somehow survived, grown, and found a place in the world. Emberlyn's glow brightened slightly. He stepped forward again, gaining confidence from Leora's steady presence behind him. The elder lowered his head, acknowledging him. It was not a rejection, it was an acceptance. At least, the beginning of one. The choice. The dragons shifted their gaze toward Leora, who stood calmly even though she felt small in comparison to their great wings and long tails. Emberlyn chirped and stepped between her and the dragons protectively. Not out of fear, but out of love. The elder dragon tilted his head, noticing the bond between them. He let out a soft rumble, not threatening, but curious. Leora knelt beside Emberlyn. "They're not here to take you away," she whispered gently. "But they might be giving you a chance to return." Emberlyn's golden eyes widened. He looked from Leora to the dragons, then back at Leora, his tail curled with uncertainty. He remembered being alone on the cold cliff, watching his clan fly away. He remembered feeling small and unwanted. But he also remembered Leora's warm hand, her gentle voice, and the way she protected him without expecting anything in return. Finally, Emberlyn stepped close to Leora and lightly touched her hand with his paw. The message was clear. He chose her. Leora felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Emberlyn nuzzled her gently, confirming it. The elder dragon let out a soft sound of understanding. The others bowed their heads respectfully. Instead of being offended, They seemed impressed. A tiny dragon choosing kindness over strength, connection over tradition. His decision showed a unique courage. In their eyes, Emberlin was no longer a rejected hatchling. He was something special, a new role for a little dragon. The elder dragon stepped forward again and made a long, melodic sound. Leora sensed it carried meaning, an offer of peace, perhaps even partnership. Emberlin chirped softly back. Leora placed her hand on Emberlin's back. I think they want to understand you. And maybe they want to understand humans too. Emberlin blinked at her, then at the dragons. His little glow brightened gently. Leora smiled. Maybe you can be something new, a bridge between our worlds. Emberlin chirped in excitement. The idea made his warm aura shine brighter. He liked being helpful. He liked bringing peace. Slowly, he stepped toward the elder dragon and gently touched his nose with his own. The dragons murmured in awe. Such a gesture between different generations and between different worlds was rare and meaningful. The elder dragon let out a calm rumble and lifted Emberlin with a gentle nudge. It wasn't a command. It was a greeting, a recognition. The forest rejoices. Over the next few hours, the dragons and Leora sat in peaceful communication. While Leora didn't understand their language, she understood their intentions through body language, gestures, and expressions. Emberlin moved proudly between both sides, sharing his glow, calming any tension, and showing he belonged with both humans and dragons. His presence softened the atmosphere like warm sunshine. A few dragons gently lowered their heads for him to climb. He jumped onto their backs playfully, chirping, which caused the group to rumble with soft amusement. Emberlin even showed them his soothing light bursts, which made nearby animals relax peacefully. The dragons were amazed. Leora watched him with pride. You were never meant to be ordinary, she whispered. Emberlin glowed happily. Acceptance and harmony. As the sun began to set, the dragons prepared to return to their migration path. But before leaving, the elder dragon bowed deeply toward Emberlin, and then toward Leora. Leora bowed back respectfully. Emberlin's glow brightened warmly, lighting the space between them. Then something beautiful happened. The dragons formed a protective half-circle around Emberlin and Leora. It felt like a blessing, an unspoken promise that Emberlin was now acknowledged, respected, and welcomed. They were not taking him away. They were giving him a place among them, even if he chose to stay with Leora. Emberlin chirped softly and touched Leora's hand again. He had made his choice earlier, and it remained the same. Leora whispered, You're free to visit them anytime. You don't have to choose just one family. Aif, the little dragon wrapped his tail around her wrist in agreement. Emberlin takes flight. As the dragons lifted into the sky, Emberlin watched with admiration. Then, feeling a spark of confidence, he spread his wings. Leora looked at him with gentle encouragement. Do you want to try? Emberlin flapped his wings. For the first time, he felt strong enough. He ran a few steps, jumped, and to his own surprise, he stayed in the air. Not high, not far, but he flew. A small, wobbly flight, but a flight filled with pure hope. Leora gasped with joy. You did it, Emberlin. The little dragon landed gently beside her, eyes sparkling proudly. He chirped excitedly and rubbed his head against her leg. You're ready, Leora said softly. Ready for the life you choose. Emberlin gazed up at the sky, where the dragons had disappeared beyond the trees. Then he looked at Leora with deep affection. This forest, this human, this life, they were all part of his place in the world now. Not rejected, not alone, not afraid, but hopeful, full of belonging, and ready for whatever future awaited him.